Good day, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabere Schuster, State Director for AARP in this territory. Today's discussion is dedicated to Mental Health Awareness Month. May has been recognized and celebrated as Mental Health Awareness Month within the United States since 1949. It is an opportunity to highlight the efforts made to reach millions across the nation to raise awareness of the importance of mental health to our overall well being. Now, more than ever, we are experiencing the vital role mental and emotional well being plays in our daily lives. Mental health affects how we think, feel, and act as we tackle life's challenges and how we function in today's society. AARP is pleased to join the awareness efforts by providing this platform to our collaborators and community partners in behavioral health on the significance of mental health awareness. Joining us today is Dr. Nicole Craigwell-Syms, Assistant Commissioner of the Virgin Islands Department of Health, to discuss their role in raising awareness and enhancing the lives of Virgin Islanders with mental health challenges and their loved ones. Good day, Dr. Sims, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to have you to discuss this very important topic. As humans, we are all dealing with the well-being of our psyche.
Absolutely.
So, I always say, or I always believe that nobody is 100% normal. We all strive to be balanced,
Right.
to be more to the middle of the spectrum rather than
True.
one end or the other.
That's true.
So, again, what is normal? The thing is that we all strive for balance in our lives, and we all have issues or face issues, different challenges in the workplace, in our family, in our home, among our friends that could take us a little bit out of balance from time to time. And the real healthy part is to be able to recognize that and to come back to center. Now,
Absolutely.
I'm taking your words away, but first of all,
No, you're doing good.
thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You have the title of doctor. I'm assuming you're a PhD. Tell us,
Yeah,
what is your PhD in?
I am. So my PhD is in psychology. I specialize in workplace trauma, as well as just workplace building and support in itself. I'm also a certified life coach, and I specialize in relationship coaching on the life coaching side of things. I am from Trinidad originally, and relocated here many moons ago, went to college, did the whole thing, and came back, and actually came back to do budgets, if you could imagine, and then was scooped up by health. So I've been working with the programs here ever since, to include the behavioral health division.
Great. And so, as the assistant commissioner of the Department of Health, um, does all of the administrative duties take up your time, or are you able to still do counseling and so forth?
It does take up my time. It's a lot. It's a big cow to try to eat, but I think the counseling and the coaching aspects of what I do and who I am play a role every day, because you oversee so many people that there's always an opportunity for counseling and coaching. The behavioral health division, I used to be directly over that division, so every time that there is a plan or something new and innovative, I really try to support them. So I get my, I guess my itch scratched in that way, where I'm not directly involved with patient care as I used to be. I definitely still have the restructuring of programs and things that are needed with that division.
Well, great. So I'm glad you're able to do a little bit of counseling from time to time.
Yes,
I
yes.
always tell everybody that I have such great respect for psychologists, and I'm a firm believer that everybody should be speaking to a psychologist.
I
Again,
agree.
as I said, we all face so many challenges, and especially in this world today, there's so many things that impact us negatively, and we need a sounding board. We
Absolutely.
need somebody who is outside of our family, somebody who can be objective, that we can share with, that we can get good feedback from. Um, to help us to make our own decisions and to become a more balanced, healthier person. So
Hmm.
I'm always encouraging everybody talk to a psychologist. It doesn't mean that you have a specific mental illness, but
Issue
talk to a
exactly, and
psychologist.
I was just going to say that. Even psychologists need psychologists, because what you're saying is true. A lot of times we're in our own head about everything that we do, so it's difficult for us sometimes to see things as they are. And everyone needs that, like you said, a sounding board, like, hey, no, Nicole, that's not what you want to do. It's not making sense. And therapy or counseling has a stigma on it, unfortunately, that we're working every day to break. Letting people know that speaking and sharing is actually a part of healing. So it doesn't matter what you go through, it could be something in the moment. I have one famous story I tell people: every time you hit your pinky toe on a bed frame and you cuss to the high heavens, that's a little hiccup in your mental health. And it's okay to have that moment. It's okay to talk about it. And before you know it, once the pain is gone, you have forgotten that, but you processed through what that was. So it's important to have those outlets, especially when it comes to your mental and behavioral health, for sure.
Very, very important. And talking about this whole issue of mental health, I've been reading that uh, depression and mental illness is on the rise among a much younger demographic,
Yeah.
children, teenagers, people in their 20s.
Hmm.
And we see it playing out with so much gun violence, other types of violence, suicide. Suicide is on the rise among a much younger demographic. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is causing that phenomenon or fostering that phenomenon?
That's a really good point. And it's hard to say sometimes exactly what the crux of the issue is. But one of the things, and I just spoke about this a few minutes ago, because the Behavioral Health Division is actually having their site visit from the federal government happening this week. But we don't always listen to young people. And I think as adults, we have this pattern of we have it, we're going to take care of it. Your job is to go to school, your job is to be the student, etc. But stress shows up in everyone. It doesn't matter your age. Stress shows up in different ways. So when the pandemic hit and we decided, okay, we're going to take care of everything as the parent, and we were like, all right, now you're in virtual schooling, now this is what you're doing. No one ever really checked in with them, what their mindset was, what they thought, how they felt. And so unchecked children turn into disgruntled adults in a lot of situations, because you're just piling on those levels of frustration. You don't have someone that is listening, and not listening to respond, but truly digesting what you're saying. Whether or not they offer a solution, you feel heard, you feel listened to. Without that there, it's like a balloon that's just going, and it's going to pop at some point. The question is, where does it pop? Does it pop in violence? Does it pop in verbal abuse? Does it pop in physical abuse? Does it pop in self-harm?
Hmm.
And so the rise of the depression and anxiety, and some of the research that I've read, it's really feeling unheard. It's not having the platform where persons say, okay, tell me what's happening with you, and not imposing their own thoughts and patterns on it. A lot of times, children, even little ones, we're talking 3, 4 years old, may come to an adult and be like, I'm sad. Some adults, believe it or not, will reply, we have to be sad about your four.
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And
Right.
that has already caused trauma. That child understands what you're saying. They may not understand their feeling on a great scale that we do, but they understand that at that point in time, I was not heard, I was not listened to, and no one really tried to say, hey, tell me what's going on with you. You know?
Right.
So the pattern of it and the practice of expressing is capped, because now you're like, okay, that 4 year old turns into a 14-year-old who's like, all right, no, it doesn't make sense for me to say anything or express anything. And then 24 years old, 34, 44. And then it's like, you never learned. So you never get the chance to express. So you slip into darkness.
Yes, it's interesting a few words and key phrases that you just mentioned about listening, about feeling unheard, about virtual schooling. I've said to many people that I believe that a lot of this stems from the fact that children and even adults are not interacting the way they used to in this digital age,
Yes, true.
right?
True.
people aren't coming together and having conversation and listening to each other. We
Hmm.
aren't hearing what the other person is saying. We're busy looking at Facebook. We're busy surfing the web. We're
Correct.
busy sending text messages,
Correct.
which do not develop interpersonal relationships
Not
at
at all.
all.
Not at all.
You go to restaurants and sometimes you see the mother, the father, and the child, and all three of them are on their cell
On
phone.
their
They're not,
phone, exactly.
yeah, they're not
Exactly.
even talking to each other. They're
It's
on their
true.
phone.
That's true. The thumbs are the strongest things that they have because it's just going.
Yeah,
That is true. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And there are a couple of housing projects that I pass through once in a while, driving from one place to the next, and you don't see children out in the yard playing with each other in these projects. They,
Mhm.
they look like ghost towns, right?
Yes. It's
They're
true.
they're all inside. They
Mhm.
may be afraid of gun violence in some cases, or in many, many cases, they're just on the internet.
Yeah.
And they aren't spending time playing with each other, developing relationships. And that is so
Absolutely.
very important to develop
It's really,
relationships.
really sad. And as you're speaking, even the life learning and life lessons that we got, like, I'm in my early 40s and I don't look it, thank you. But
You look great.
I would thank you. I would sit with my grandmother and my grandparents. I will talk,
Hmm.
and she would tell me all of the things that she did. You admire those persons. Today you don't have that. So
Right.
the digital era has even wiped life lessons, learning, even if they're not physically active, which they really aren't. I mean, children can't even beat me in a foot race at this point in time, but they're not even taking words of wisdom from persons who lived in an era where it's so impactful, life
Yes.
lessons that they could use. There's no connectivity. So it's like we had the generation of our grandparents and our great aunts, etc. Then there's like my generation, and there's really like a gap. And then you have them on the digital era. So we're missing, there's a disconnect, which I think is so sad because that is so valuable. That's how we learn, that's how we go through life. We pick fruits from everyone's tree, but they're really disconnected when it comes to that. So
Yeah. And then this is also impacting the older population
yes.
because here you have people who are much older who are not digitally attuned, right?
Right.
And they're hoping for their children, their grandchildren to come and visit and talk with them. But
Yes.
then when those grandchildren come to visit, they're coming with a cell phone in hand,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
And the grandparent is sitting there watching them play on their cell phone.
Exactly. And they try
And
to communicate and it's like they're frustrated. They don't want to be bothered. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, truth be told, even when I go to visit my mother, I have to really consciously force myself to put down my cell phone because I'm
Mhm.
always on my work email. But I have to say, no, I need to be here. I need to be present to my
Present.
mother. I
Yes.
need to put down my cell phone. I need to discipline myself
Yep.
and focus on her.
Yep.
Um, but so if it's a struggle for me who's so very
Hmm.
much aware of this, especially working for AARP and knowing the terrible negative impact of social isolation on the older population,
Yeah.
imagine for other people who are not as attuned as I am.
Right,
you
exactly.
know
And it's
yeah.
funny that you mentioned that. What I try to do with even it's piecemeal because I have a nephew who's always on his phone, and I tell him, listen, you're gonna be in tune with me, and I in tune with you. So even if we go out to dinner and all of my friends, etc., I do the phone pile, and whoever touches their phone first has to pay the bill. It's like something that minimal. Like I try to infuse because we need to communicate, and I feel like it's worked quite well. Maybe no one wants to pay the astronomical bills, but the fact is that there's an actual connection with persons on the table. You know what I mean? So there could be hope for maybe infusing some of those little tricks of the trade, in those types of visits.
Exactly. So hopefully somehow or the other we can change this culture, this digital culture,
Yep,
and get people talking again and sharing thoughts, ideas, sharing feelings, learning how to engage in conflict resolution,
absolutely.
healthy conflict resolution. And,
Exactly.
one of our viewers here on Facebook put a comment. that it's not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Going back again to what we said earlier, what happened to you? Things that affect us, and how do we
Hmm.
deal with those things that impact us all the time.
Hmm.
And so now talking about COVID-19. In the wake of this pandemic, mental illness soared, and in a 2021 study by the Center for Disease Control, nearly half of Americans surveyed reported symptoms of an anxiety or depressive disorder,
Yes.
and 10% of respondents felt their mental health needs were not being met.
Hmm.
Now that we are in the endemic phase, how are we managing our emotional and mental well-being? What are you seeing and hearing, and what is the research saying?
Yeah. So, it's kind of like we have to reintroduce ourselves to our mental health and our emotional health and connectivity. During COVID was the first time that many of us who are living, there may be a sprinkle of people who are over 100 who may have remembered the plague of yesteryear, but those of us who experience this for the first time really experience isolation for the first time. As a collective, we don't isolate. Even if people are like, oh, I live by myself, I live far away, I don't like to be around people, etc., there's still a very foundational need that is met with people. COVID cut that abruptly. So you found those levels of anxiety because it's like, okay, am I the island? They always say no man is an island. Like, am I that man? Am I the island? So now that we're in the phase that we're in, we still took a lot of that trauma with us. And it's almost as if we have to reintroduce ourselves to building bridges, communicating, talking, embracing. Caribbean culture as a whole, I find, is a very lovey-dovey culture. We hug, we meet. And for 3 years or so, that was also cut. So you had a lot of adjustments to make. And now we're in a point in time where, it only takes about 21 days to build a habit. We were doing that for almost 3, 4 years. So now it's like, okay, how do I unlearn and how do I reconnect with people? But I tell people at this point in time, it's about the genuine nature and psychological safety. It's about
Mhm.
understanding what your love language is, whether it is personal touch or quality time or, words of affirmation or whatever those things are, understanding it and reintroducing it to people who are around you. So, for instance, my love language would be words of affirmation. So, as an assistant commissioner, it is my job to mirror that activity, to encourage people and to ask them, hey, how are you? How's your mom? And really listen to the response, not in passing, and have people really kind of reconnect with being safe again in an environment where we were kind of forced out just 2 years ago.
Yeah, and talking about our culture and as you put it, being lovey-dovey, or some people would say touchy-feely.
That's usually.
Um, you know, um, that touch is so very important. I love to hug.
Hmm.
I'm always happy to give everybody a hug. I think we all need a hug. We all need to feel that warm embrace. We
Yes.
all need to feel a warm handshake. I don't like that dops that people do these
I know
days.
that the little there's
Yeah, I don't like that. A
no energy
warm.
moving through. You don't feel the tips.
Exactly, right? A
Yeah.
warm handshake does
Yeah.
so much more than
Yeah.
a dops.
Yeah. I agree.
Um, and through the pandemic, we just weren't able to do all of that. But now that we're in the endemic phase, I hope that that wonderful, expressive part of our culture is returning, where people feel comfortable embracing each other and giving a kiss on the cheek and a
Hmm.
warm handshake,
Correct.
an arm around the shoulder, all of that kind of stuff, which is so healing and so nurturing and so revitalizing.
Yeah, and it's a simple gesture. I think a lot of times when it comes to like mental health, people want to eat the whole cow. Some things that support us mentally and emotionally are so simple. Like you're saying, just the connection of the hand, the kiss on the cheek, the hug. That goes a long way to rebuilding that sense of community and love and trust that we once had before we didn't have to think about anything. A lot of this too that we're experiencing is we're still working through the trauma. A lot of people have survivor's remorse as well. I lost about 8 members of my close knit during COVID.
Wow.
And survivor's remorse is a real deal because you wonder, well, why did I make it? How am I here? And you go through all of these things. If you take all of those things on solo, it definitely will have an effect on you. And we want to kind of remove ourselves from doing those things alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even though many people are reporting symptoms of mental illness, the disease is often undiagnosed due to many misconceptions, including stigma, lack of mental health services, or that their behavior is normal part of aging. Um, so they're often overlooked or unreported. So, what are some key facts the public should know about mental illness? What should they be aware of, and how would they go about finding help?
hmm Well, firstly, as we mentioned very early on in the program, communication, having someone to speak with, having someone to share things with. And it's important because when you have someone that you share things with, the person understands your pattern. So if I communicate with you, for instance, on a frequent basis, and every time we speak, you're like, oh my God, Nicole is amazing, which I am, right? And then one day I speak to you and I'm not amazing. Your red flag is going to go up. You don't have to be, a trained professional to be like, hey, so your question of what's happening with you, something seems off, is a self trigger that we encourage people to look into. It could be a discussion, it could be something more, but you would then have to call and find out or ask, and have someone really identify what some of those areas can be. Now, places like Beautiful Dreamers and Insight are excellent. They have some really great counselors that see persons, on a regular basis. And of course, the Department of Health. And I'm trying to find that number that can be utilized. But we provide the therapeutic services. We try to do this in a ripple effect because we do need help. We're not a very big team, but we try to train persons on, first aid psychosis and things like that, where you're able to really see that something is happening and you seek the treatment necessary for it.
Yeah, talking about communication again, I firmly believe in what I call self-communication, if I may use that term that I coined. but that self-communication is communicating with yourself.
hmm
Um, again, in reference to the digital age, we are so caught up in our phones. We're listening to music, we're watching videos on YouTube, we're watching Netflix on our devices.
hmm
We have so much external stimuli going
Yeah,
on, and we
yeah,
don't find time to be with ourselves and to engage in the reflection, which you also referred to a moment ago. The
yes.
self reflection,
hmm
reflecting on our own thoughts, reflecting on our own feelings.
Yep.
I always encourage people to find some time each day to just be alone and be quiet,
That's excellent.
right?
That is excellent advice. Yep.
Even if it's just a half an hour, hopefully it's a little longer than that, but turn everything off and just be
Mm-hmm.
silent and face yourself, face your own
Exactly.
fears,
Yeah.
face your own anxieties, face
Yep.
your own feelings, and reflect on that and figure out how you're going to solve the issues or how you're going to talk to somebody else who can walk you through it, whether it's a counselor or a close friend that you can trust. But to really be alone with yourself, and so many people are afraid to be alone with
They are.
themselves.
They are. They are. And that's really part of, sometimes it's part of a bigger picture, whatever experiences we've had growing up, the shining the light on a lot of those issues can be difficult. But like you're saying, if you do put that to the test and you see something, then you work through, how do I get help for this?
Hmm.
How do I get someone to help me realize what's happening, but also support me through the journey of getting to a place where I am now comfortable. I know, not everything is our fault that we experience in life. And sometimes we just need to talk it through to get to that point where we're like, oh, okay, that really was not my fault. I dealt with it. It happened. Here I am right now. It's usually that initial door it's hard to get through that initial door.
And everything in balance, while I talk about self communication and that self reflection and those quiet moments, it's not to be completely isolated, right? We don't want
Right.
extended periods of
Exactly. Yeah.
self-isolation
Yeah. We
because
need
then
to
that's
cap it.
problematic too. Yes.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
a matter of
true.
finding the balance even in that.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Exactly. And people, people combine a lot of those things. I remember a couple years ago, I struggled to figure out, okay, where do I put a place for Nicole? Because people are calling all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And so I have like a prayer corner like in my home. That corner now is for everything. If I need to go in there and sit and just kind of meditate, journal, whatever the case is. And it gave me a sense of ownership. So those are also places where no one else is allowed to come. Like you said, that's for you. That is your space. Even if it's dead in your living room, make it clear, hey, this is mine. The second you walk into that space, you will feel a sense of relief even before you begin to work, because you own that this is my piece. This is where I go to get in tune with me and then see what I would probably need to do to assist myself. So, little tips, but they all come together to make life just that easier.
right, right. And wherever that place may be, whether it is sitting on your favorite beach under a tree or
Yep.
a prayer corner in your room,
Yep.
or, I sometimes I like to just drive and go down by the lagoon, and Christian said, and just sit in my car near the water and look at,
Right.
at the water,
Exactly.
listen to the sound of the waves.
Yes.
Wherever that quiet place is in your favorite park, but just finding that place and making special time for
Mhm.
yourself to come back to yourself, to find yourself
Exactly.
in the midst of the chaos of the world,
Exactly.
and and to deal with all the trauma. I mean, we hear about wars and the threat of nuclear wars, and we hear of gun violence. It's like almost we're afraid to go to shopping malls these days, etc. So we need to find that inner strength to keep coming out and to keep
We do.
interacting and socializing and so
We
forth.
do.
And
And the
yeah,
reassurance, it's like a lot of those things that you mentioned are, global empathies that we have, because it's like, oh my God, but there is a connectivity that we have as people that keeps us from consuming all of it. I God forbid, I wouldn't even want to know what it's like to consume all of what's happening in the world, you
right.
know. So it's kind of like we have to help one another with the piecemeal that we're dealing with, as a collective in order to move forward.
Well, our time together has passed quickly. We have about 45 seconds. Can you tell our listening audience how they can find out more about the services offered by the Department of Health?
Sure. So on our website, the Department of Health, DOH.com actually is that simple, or you can just Google USVI Department of Health, and all of our programs will actually come up. Our behavioral health division, that phone number direct is 340-712-0096. And you can also find out information about us on our Facebook pages and other outlets that we have relative to programs. And we always advertise whenever we have anything happening surrounding mental health and behavioral health. So once you have any of the outlets to include radio, we'll definitely let you know what's happening.
Well, great, Dr. Sims. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we encourage our listening and viewing audience to be healthy and to utilize mental health services, counseling services to help you become
Absolutely.
more balanced. So,
Love on
thank you for being with
yourself.
us.
Love on yourselves, everybody.
Excellent, excellent. Will do. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.